A satirical take on a deal with the devil himself is hampered by the style of its telling, a telling I confess I had to look up to understand. The Duc de la Omelette is a challenging and confusing read with way too much untranslated French in my opinion, even though the title is in French, so it should be obvious that there's going to be a little bit of that. It feels fun and lighthearted in hindsight, knowing a little bit more of what it's about, but I only know that much because of research. I give The Duc de la Omelette a 2 out of 5. So, in case you had no idea what happened in this story when you read it, well, I had no idea either. That's just kind of the way this story goes, I think. The way that the English is written isn't very understandable, and the fact that there is so much untranslated French that you have to look up yourself to get an idea of what they're saying is even worse. I believe in my first reading, about one of the 3 pages, maybe even just like 3/4 of the 3 pages of the story, I actively understood. The rest of it was a very mixed bag and came at the cost of my general understanding. It left me very confused overall. On my first read of the story, I really only understood that a man had ended up in hell in some way, somehow, and then I remember a couple references to fencing and dueling and card games, and that was basically the extent of how much of this story I understood. When I read the story, I had no idea if I would actually be able to cover it on this series like I originally planned to, and like I said I would, because of how little I understood. But I was able to do a little bit of research and get a better grasp on the story as a whole, and rereading certain passages has confirmed some of that for me. In essence, The Duc de la Omelette is a satire. That is how it was written and how it was meant to be viewed, is solely as a satire. A man in the beginning chokes on food and goes straight to hell, but the man in hell strikes a conversation up with the devil himself, and this was some of the references, some of the passage of the story that I actually understood the first time, saying he is leaving. Basically, the man says, "I don't belong here, goodbye." But before he actually attempts to leave, the man decides to explore around a little bit, get an idea of his bearings, see where he's actually at. And I will say that Poe does strike an intriguing and evocative description of hell. Like I said, this was some of the only material here that I actually understood, and it was very evocative. The imagery was done very well. Finally, the actual escape, though, after the man's explored around and kind of gets a glimpse at his surroundings, kind of what he's dealing with, he discovers that in order to escape hell, he has to have a duel with the devil, a fencing duel, a duel that he is not equipped to actually perform and be able to escape properly. So the man refuses to duel, and instead the two of them fight via a game of cards. The man cheats and wins his freedom in the card game. Rereading some of these passages, like I said, made them a little bit more understandable, but the fact that I had to do research to even have a sort of idea of what I was trying to read made this a little bit more of a mixed bag for me. In the end, the story is fun, but almost entirely in hindsight. This is why I gave it a 2 out of 5, because I liked the imagery, and because the conceit of the story is fun in hindsight, but reading it is not the smoothest or most pleasant experience, and the degree of French in the writing that you have to manually translate makes the story a little bit too obtuse in my personal view. Next fortnight, on the 25th of February, I'll be covering The Alchemist by H.P. Lovecraft. You can find the link to the story to follow along or to read ahead of time in the description below. I hope to see you there.